Hi, everybody. This is Richard Sachs on Lost Arts Radio. We're back with our friend David Rodriguez, who was here a couple of years ago on the show, and we're talking about education. That's his main focus, and he's the founder of Valor Academy in San Jose, and also of Education Options Expo, and we'll talk about what those are. And he's also the author of books, one of them in particular, at least with Ron Paul and John Taylor Gatto and others, and we've got enough to talk about for probably several weeks on this show, but we'll hold it to a normal show amount of time. And what I really want to get into, especially, is the issue of education with getting into a career that's not helping to destroy the world, which most of the good jobs seem to be right now. So it's going to be very interesting. And welcome, David, and thanks for the time. I know you're busy, and it's going to be fun.
Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate the good work that you're doing, and this conversation is super important. So yeah, happy to be with you and your audience today.
I think it is. Now, we always like to include people that don't know what we're talking about yet or didn't see the last show or things like that. So why don't you give just a little bit of background for, go back before you got into this whole education thing, why you ended up in this direction and the high points of what's happened up to now, and then we'll take it from there.
Sure. Yeah, I was raised in a small town, and my original dream was just to make a lot of money and sit on the beach and have a good life. And then as I started to get older, I realized that money is just one aspect of success. Actually, success, in my opinion now, is leaving a legacy, making the world a better place, investing in the next generation. So looking for an injustice to correct, as my mentor guided me, I found the school system. And through a strange occurrence, I got to meet John Taylor Gatto, the world-famous school teacher, and he wrote the original book in 2000 about the underground history of American education. He wrote Dumbing Us Down in 1990, and then Weapons of Mass Instruction. His short stories, he was the New York State Teacher of the Year 2 times. He taught for 30 years in the public school system. And he was just so mesmerized that the school system doesn't actually empower kids. And so he was curious, did some research, and found out that it was designed to create obedient people for the benefit of the state and for mega corporations. And so I met him and got to take some courses on starting a school and got in business with him. And so I started my Education Options Expo. And then I started my Valor Academy, and even now consulting for Homeschool Leader, which I started to consult parents to gain confidence and courage to remove their children from the school system. I think is one of the most important things they can do. And so that was began about 5 years ago, and now just in that process now still, having different workshops that I do. I'll have another workshop next weekend and in a month at different organizations, because I'm in California, where there's mandatory vaccines, so you're a health expert, so the toxins that are in these injections, they're mandating it. This is a deeply immoral situation, and parents have to homeschool now, unless you want to either fabricate some forms from the doctor or have a healthy child in general. You got to do that. So before the vaccines issue, I knew this was going to become a really important topic. And it is now. Now I think it's 9 states that have mandatory vaccines. Germany has mandatory vaccines. I think there's bills in the U.S. Congress to mandate adult vaccines. So we're at a very serious time. And, we might not be able to change the whole system, overnight or in a week or 2 or a year. But mom and dad out there, if you have a child in the school system, I recommend you take a look at what's going on in the school system and remove them if you can. And, I can help with that. So and then John Gatto's book went out of print, so I was able to republish that. As you mentioned, I got Dr. Ron Paul in the foreword. That's volume 1, and I got 2 more volumes coming. And so now it's just a matter of helping parents gain the courage, gain the skills, the knowledge to pull their kids out and have their kids be successful, because we all want our kids to be happy and healthy and independent. And the question is, what is an education? What is success? What is intelligence? What are we after here? And this may be one of the most important questions that parents can be asking, and it's difficult. I know, it's we have to deprogram ourselves a lot, and so now I just go around where I'm invited to speak. I'll do workshops and trainings, personal one-on-one consulting, and working on different websites to scale this up and actually use technology as you're doing here on YouTube and various platforms to really take advantage that at this point we have somewhat of a free internet, and of course the state doesn't want that to continue, and these globalists that just want a global state. So it's all intertwined with the children. They prey on our children, and I find that's unacceptable. So I try to help as many people as I can, whether on your show or other people's shows and platforms, to discuss some of these topics that I mentioned and overcome their fears. They can actually gain the courage to pull their kids out and empower them.
I got a few questions from that. It's just so packed with implications, everything you've been saying. And one of my first questions, though, is John Taylor Gatto saw what was wrong with education even before it was as bad as it is now, before they were physically doing things to kids like they are now. How did he get chosen Teacher of the Year if he understood that they were completely, malicious? I mean, why would they choose him as that?
It's so amazing because Teacher of the Year in New York is chosen by the people. So people make submissions and they actually put him on the ballot, put him in that position. And so because he was actually interfacing with parents and eighth graders, because he was an eighth grade teacher, they were like, man, we love this guy. And so he was going around helping them start their own like flea markets, their own little marketplaces, and help them do apprenticeships and actually create stuff of value, not just memorizing tests. And so in the community, he was known, and pretty soon they submitted his name and they voted him in. He was a 3-time New York City Teacher of the Year, and then, as I mentioned, the New York State Teacher of the Year twice.
So they must have realized they got to stop this thing of letting people decide on their own Teacher of the Year thing, but it was too late by the time he got in. The other thing you mentioned, that homeschooling is a way to avoid forced medical treatments at the moment in places like California. But I'm sure, in fact, when they passed SB 277 in that state, they were trying to get homeschools included. And they had to compromise and say, well, okay, we'll just take the private school kids for now. But you mentioned Germany, and Germany and Sweden, I think, have a different attitude toward homeschooling, right? I don't know if they've both outlawed it at this point. I think Sweden has. And I'm sure some of the parents are thinking ahead and saying, what are we going to do when that happens?
Yes. I would definitely encourage you, if you have a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old or however age your child is, to understand the state would make mandatory vaccines required for homeschooling. You mentioned private schooling, many daycares. I mean, this is a totalitarian organization entity that is showing itself. I'm telling my clients now, my friends and people that are still kind of unaware of the severity of what's happening, tyranny isn't coming, it's here. So we really got to be strategic about, what we're doing with our children. This is intergenerational organized crime. That's what the state is. The state is also a belief in authority. And we have to remember of our inalienable rights. And it's time to evolve, in my opinion. The principles of self-ownership are going to be at the forefront. Who owns your body? The principles of non-aggression. You can do whatever you want as long as you don't aggress against people. And you have the principle of self-defense. So yes, parents definitely need to be thinking about it and start thinking intergenerationally. That's my recommendation, because it's like a Titanic, a giant ship. When you turn the wheel, the ship doesn't just automatically turn on a dime. It takes a while for the ship to turn. And so, that's the work that you're doing, and myself and some of our, colleagues and respectable, people around us, is like we're trying to turn it away from tyranny and turn it back towards freedom. And I do feel that it is a race between these two. It's like the tortoise and the hare, which one's going to win? And I believe freedom will win. I think, there is opportunity that we can lose, but the children is where it's at, and that's why they are predators of children, because children are still in their uncritical mind. And that's what Gatto identified, and other writers have too, that they don't want children to be able to think independently and evaluate and make assessments and make decisions based on their own values, based on what they want in life. They want to have statism, the worship of this organization, and as they go off to war, potentially with Iran and previously with Afghanistan and Iraq, it's like, when are people going to stop agreeing to kill other people, as a solution? I mean, this is a ridiculous situation. So they have to use false flags and propaganda. But as we start to see each other, in the mirror and say, hey, you're just my brother, you're just my sister, we look different, we might have different religions, but like killing people just is not a solution. This just benefits the military industrial complex, and it causes more problems. It causes more hate. It causes more anger towards the governments that exist. And homeschooling is one of the most beneficial and enlightening ways that children can learn to think for themselves, to pursue their interests and passions. And I do believe this is the future, and it's going to be one person at a time. So I recommend parents, think about it and really strongly consider removing their children and exploring some of these concepts we're going to be talking about here.
Right. I know you mentioned Ron Paul, who was trying to get the Constitution back into American government, and I know that, at least I would think, that his attitude would be, even if they succeed in canceling the Constitution legally, that the rights that it refers to don't come from the Constitution. And that's a really central issue. And the other thing is the Constitution is not intended to just be enforced unless there's an emergency declared.
Yeah, that's really important, that we have rights that come from our nature, or if you believe in God. And this was already decided 200 years ago in life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and property. And so there's a concept called voluntarism, also known as anarchy, where it believes in those principles that we just discussed. So unfortunately, most of these politicians, most of these agents of the state, they did make an oath to the Constitution, which is good in theory, but it's just a criminal organization now. The taxes are 30 to 50%, depending on how you evaluate them. The FDA is corrupted, the CDC, they're all in collusion with each other to benefit themselves. And, there's a great book out there called Understanding Our Slavery, which just points out the state is a tool of tyranny. It's a tool of organized crime. So just like back in the days when the king said, hey, I rule you because God made me the king, now it's to the point where these politicians say, we rule over you because you voted us in. And so I think the future is where we say, I own myself, I don't consent. And Lysander Spooner wrote this 100 years ago in his book, No Treason, Constitution of No Authority. And his proposition, which seems like it's really right on point, is that the Constitution is an invalid contract because I didn't sign it. So you can't just assume that we're in relation with each other because you just say it. They call it social contract. And so it takes two willing and fully disclosed or knowledgeable parties about a contract to agree to it. And as revolutionary as that sounds, I think that's where people will find remedy and find answers, because there's so many parents out there trying to fight these forced vaccine bills, and they're making maybe a little bit of progress or losing some ground, but it's time to transcend the state, to evolve, and to really take that leap to go beyond what is this piece of paper that says governments and politicians can rule over us. It says, no, you're the president and the king of your life, and so am I. And if we want to engage in a relationship, we will do it voluntarily. But I don't just owe you allegiance. I don't owe you money. And this is kind of, I think, one of the greatest secrets of our generation is that we're free, we're born this way, and I don't owe you anything unless we engage, governments and cities and states.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's possible to have a government that does good things. It's just only in theory right now. But I mean, they could be defending the individual rights of the people who live in that country, and that's kind of what it was supposed to be like. But didn't quite work out that way. And at this point, even the voting is probably not real because of the ownership of the voting machines is in private hands, and they can switch votes whenever they want to. Yep.
That's right. It's got to be one of the biggest scams. Choose the blue party or the red party, but like it's all in cahoots. It's all in the same team. So imagine if you were the rulers, or I was, we don't want the masses to have any control. We want them to think they have control. And so that's what the Council on Foreign Relations is about, and the book Tragedy and Hope. This was all, worked out decades ago. And so thanks to the internet, we're able to discover these things and realize it's all just a big game, and we're players and pawns. So we got to step out of their game, stop participating with them, and build our own communities. I think this is also something that gives me hope. It's like we got to engage with each other and understand that we don't owe them anything. And again, the Constitution to defend, national security and defend property, is what it was, to protect those rights. And now they're actually the ones violating those
Yeah, I mean, originally it was supposed to be a group of people who lived in a given country, in this case, the U.S., which was actually a confederacy of states. It wasn't a single, monolithic structure, or wasn't supposed to be. I think Lincoln took care of that. But it was supposed to be defend the borders, which is, I think, quite reasonable unless everybody else wants freedom too. You're going to have a border issue. And defend the individual rights of people against other people in the country and against corporations or whatever form it may come in. And that would have been pretty reasonable, and it wouldn't have cost much. And they were supporting the government with tariffs that guaranteed that all the industry wouldn't leave. And I think that was really good. But it was a power position that attracted people with bad motives. And they've all arrived at this point, I think.
Yep. Power attracts these people that want to rule over others, and that's why you see a lot of immoral people in politics. And there are good people, I should say, trying to fix the system from within. And like I mentioned, you can make some type of small degrees of progress. They've legalized cannabis, in Colorado, was it 8 years ago or so, and now you start to see that. And even like mushrooms and different psychedelic type plants that are helping people with PTSD and these kind of things. It's just that if in a free society is that you take responsibility for your life, and you could eat anything and drink anything, and you just take responsibility for your actions.
For your actions, exactly. And, it's still an issue. They almost outlawed homeopathy, for example, in the U.S., which people wouldn't think it would do anything because it's so dilute. There's almost no physical trace of anything in the solution, but people get fixed from it. And so that's a big threat to the drug industry, and it's almost illegal now. It's still an issue, and a lot of this comes down to consciousness, and you mentioned intelligence in the beginning. And that's an interesting concept because there are some very intelligent people with, measured in terms of IQ tests that are incapable of having any common sense and often end up working for total destruction. So at this point in your understanding, how do you define intelligence, and is there more than one kind of it?
Yeah, it's a beautiful question. Probably one of the best questions I've been asked for in a while. Intelligence, in my opinion, is when someone moves closer to their self-selected goals. So this is why they don't teach this, like how to select your own goals, right, based on your values and beliefs. And then when you make progress towards it, baby steps or giant leaps, in my opinion, that's what makes you intelligent. Howard Gardner from Harvard says that there's 8 types of intelligence, and he groups them into like music, physical intelligence, spatial visualization, interpersonal, intrapersonal, and maybe about 5 more. And in my opinion, because you are unique, everyone's unique, there's about 7 billion types of intelligences. Your DNA makes you one among 7 billion. So you have your own type of intelligence. So do I. And we're not competing against anybody in that way. We're all genius or brilliant. As Buckminster Fuller said, each child's a born genius. They just get D-genius trying to please their teachers and please their parents. Right. So, that's how I define it, is that it is moving closer to your goals, and IQ and memorization, there's value in that. There's type of mental faculties, sure. But that's just one, as we mentioned earlier, to be able to think for your own self. That's, I think, what distinguishes us from any type of animal, is that we can actually sit there and contemplate and just evaluate, say, okay, based on these facts and based on my goals or based on, history, here's what I decide to do. Here's what I want to do. And whether it's just reading or building a project or an invention, there's so many different types of intelligences, and schools just measure the memorization for like math or for language. And even that, it's all construed as well, because language is one of the superpowers. So when I coach parents, I let parents know expression and communication is one of the most important things you can demonstrate and facilitate for your child, because we naturally want to communicate. Children naturally want to, say how they're feeling, what do they desire, what do they want. And as children learn to express themselves, expand their vocabulary, now they can actually begin to explore different ideas and concepts and then, become more intelligent, achieve their goals, and live a life that they love.
What about, you mentioned moving toward a goal as being a sign of intelligence, choosing your own goal and then moving toward it, and analyzing what you're doing to get there. So how would you further break down intelligence between two people that both do that? One of them says, well, I want power, so my goal is to enslave everybody to a central banking system with the local branches doing fractional reserve lending of money they don't have. It's going to be great, and I'll be able to take everybody's wealth and steal in a very respectable manner. And the other person says, like you're doing, we need education for people to have better lives and things like that. And they both move toward their goals, and they're both very intelligent. They both have high IQs. What's the difference?
I would say their moral code or their moral compass. And this is also one of the extremely disempowering parts of forced schooling, is they rarely talk about morality. I mean, I'm curious what your listeners and viewers, think about morality and moral compass. Like, I didn't hear that until I was like in college, and I'm like, what is that? Well, It's just like how you determine right and wrong. It's like one of the most important things. And this is why the secrets of self-ownership and non-aggression are so potent, is that once you know that you can do whatever you want as long as you don't hurt another person or harm their property. This is the fundamental principles of a person who owns themselves, which we all do. This is your flesh and blood. And I didn't even hear anything about that. So once children, especially children, like are really kind of unconsciously or subconsciously attuned to justice. And so that gets drilled out of them when they have to listen to complete strangers. You got to get permission to go to the bathroom. That alone, getting permission to urinate and defecate is one of the most dehumanizing things you can do to a human being. I would never require anybody to ask me for permission. However, at a national and international scale, that's what's happening. Kids got to sit down. They got to get permission from this stranger who's not going to be in their life to go do a bodily function. So that basically just shows them that, their opinion doesn't matter, their desires and needs don't matter. And as we become more enlightened and conscious, we realize that everyone's needs matter, and we want to respect each other. And this is, why we desire win-win relationships, mutually beneficial outcomes. And schools don't do that. These giant corporations do that. So the difference between these guys who use the Federal Reserve and this fractional reserve system to steal from people is they have no moral code, or I guess you could call it amoral. It's not neither wrong or right that what they're doing, but they're basically opportunists. And as Nicholas Rockefeller told Aaron Russo, he said, just take care of your family. Who cares about anybody else?
Yeah.
Whereas you and I, it's like we say, let's take care of everybody. Let's help everybody. As long as I got enough to eat, and like you got enough, like There's abundance for us all. And again, that's why I love Buckminster Fuller, because he said, let's use our technology for livingry rather than weaponry. And the problem with that is that if you sell the bombs and the tanks, you now can't make any money, which is why free energy isn't been distributed, as Tesla would have wanted. Oil and gas companies, they would be out of business with free energy. So there's all these warring interests. They're trying to benefit themselves and benefit their progeny, but long term, they're putting us in a tough place. And I think a freedom revolution awakening is happening, and hopefully it's going to be peaceful rather than violent.
So if the difference between those two in the example was the moral code or the lack of moral code, people look at that question like you might have before you heard about it, like you said when you were in college or something, and they think, well, my moral code is what I memorized. It's my belief system. My group tells me what the moral code is, and I just have to do it. What's the other way? Let's say you never saw a book with any moral codes or anything in it. You could still have a moral code, right? Where would it come from?
Yeah, so this is what we learned as kids, before we went to school. Don't hit people, don't steal their stuff. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And then in school, the moral code that gets indoctrinated is statism, right? The belief in a state. And that's why you pledge allegiance to the flag for the republic for which it stands. So they require you to go to school based on mandatory attendance, deeply immoral. They make you pledge allegiance to their flag, their color. And I'm not saying I don't respect America as a country, or as I should say, as a tradition. I think the Declaration of Independence was good, but it's just time to evolve. You know, there was the monarchy, then there was a republic, and now we want to move to individual self-ownership. And they get the code because the teachers told them this is what you need to do. Some people get it from the Bible, but to be really simple, it's that you just don't harm people, you just don't steal their stuff, and you don't damage their property. And that is it. This is the new moral code, but we're kind of remembering it. You know, as I mentioned, there was inalienable rights in the Declaration of Independence. So where did they go? They got indoctrinated out of us. That's why people need permission. You mentioned homeopaths, right?
Yeah.
This is just another branch of medicine. Why do they need licenses? You know, if you have a voluntary customer, it's mutually beneficial. You give me the money, give me the herbs or whatever the solution is,
Right.
End of transaction. But the state comes in there and says, no, you got to get a license. And now you have the medical board in your business. And, you know, this goes back to the, Rockefeller starting the, allopathic type medicine where it's, pro-pharmaceuticals and
Right.
a very, you got to give them credit, a very clever system. It's just, it's harming people. And so this is how we can transcend is we say, I don't owe you anything because I live here. I'm a free human being. And so we have to go beyond statism, and it is to the voluntarism and not giving obedience to some third party because that's what they say we should do. You know, it's like I'll be loyal to who I want to be loyal to, but it's really kind of got to go 2 steps backwards to go 1 step forward. You know, like we got to remember, what do you value? What are your traditions? What is your faith? What's important to you? And from there, we can begin again. But we can't go through with this current system of choosing a left ruler or right ruler or Democrats or Republicans. And, if we want transformational change, we're going to have to go beyond that, in my opinion.
Right. And we've been taught that the idea of questioning everything is unscientific and immoral, and you're just supposed to believe what you're told by the rulers. And I think the rulers appreciate that system very much, and they just are using it to the maximum. But, and this gets into the subject that I want to eventually get into, which is how to prepare for a career that's not destroying the world. And an example, just because technology advances doesn't mean that it's in a form that won't destroy life. So an example of that very few people understand that it's totally destructive is the whole current version of wireless Wi-Fi, 5G, which is the next version of it, and all the smart devices and the smart grid, which will allow everybody to be totally controlled, working through your appliances and your automobiles and eventually driverless cars and stuff like that. But even the initial version that we're in now with Wi-Fi has been clearly shown to damage all life forms. And everybody just assumes because everybody else is using it, it must be fine. So a kid in school may be intelligent, may set out his own course, follow it to get his career and everything, and he ends up with a technology that's national suicide or world suicide. How does education play a part in preventing that mistake?
Yeah, parents out there, I recommend you examine your own moral code and discuss rights and wrongs, good and bad in your house so that your child doesn't go up. And I had a family member recently join the Marines, join the military, and he's a smart kid, and I love this kid.
Yeah.
But why did he go in the Marines? Because his parents were supportive of the military-industrial complex. So the parents have the most influence, and of course the movies, the books, the television shows that they watch, but it's up to the parents really to discuss these things and help them find their values. And then from there, you can identify mentors in the space or people that you respect who aren't using coercion and force and say, I want to be like that person. And maybe you get an apprenticeship with them, or you read their books, or you go to their events or talks, but you want to learn what these visionary people are doing so that you can replicate and duplicate. Because you're not going to learn it in the public schools for sure. You're not going to learn it in universities in general. Again, I'm sure there's some good college professors who have morality and are pro-freedom, but most of them is pro-statism, and they don't understand what is really happening. You mentioned the Wi-Fi and various wireless technologies. There's Agenda 21. This is something also parents need to be aware of, that these guys do want a global state. It goes back to 1992. And before that, there was the League of Nations. This is serious. This is intergenerational, what these guys are doing. They generally want to have power over your children and grandchildren in perpetuity. And they want to RFID chip you. And I wish I was making this up, but that's what's going on. So I think you've got to kind of start there and understand that these things, these power, these laws, these regulations that are creeping in, they're not by accident. It's very strategic, as are the forced vaccines. And it's like, well, these things just don't happen, okay? They can print money, literally, so they can buy any politician in general. They can, get any type of initiative. So what are they doing? They're creeping in, taking away freedoms, and they want to have us believe in the Declaration of Human Rights by the United Nations, which essentially are rights the United Nations approves of versus rights that God gives you or nature gives you. So they're trying to redefine human rights, and unless more people speak up, like you and other individuals out there, then they'll win. So you got to understand what are human rights. Where do they come from? And again, it starts with the parents discussing these things of morality, and then identifying corporations that are doing bad. I think I just saw an article about Monsanto, I think in Bayer, DuPont. I think they're all merging. I can't remember if that article was from the last few months or so, but they're becoming a super mega agro business. So I think everything's going to go towards decentralization for the people that are aware. Like the power wants to basically consolidate so that they can have like one dictator over these things and rule from within. But I think the communities that are going to be building are going to be decentralizing, trying to find their own food, their own water, their own relationships, their own win-win outcomes, and get away from the centralized technology. Well, even like Bitcoin is one of those technologies. That's just 10 years old, and that's a decentralized currency, money that's been around for a short period of time, but it's starting to gain some traction. There's other decentralized currencies. So it's this fight for good and evil, and the tyrants use the state, they use the flag, they use nationalism and patriotism. So you feel like, yeah, we're a part of something, but I think it's going to get back to small communities, and maybe it's 8 people or 20 or 50 or 100 people, but you got to get away from this kind of group think and conformity and begin asking, is it okay what's going on? And in my opinion, forced vaccines are unacceptable. Mandatory attendance schooling, unacceptable. And we got to get to the point where we draw a line in the sand and we say, this is not okay, what we're doing. We're not going to participate. And there's a guy named Gene Sharp who talks about non-violent weapons like Martin Luther King and Gandhi. And I'm starting to learn more about some of the work that he does, because the thing that these tyrants need, they need our cooperation. They need our consent and willingness to work with them, obedience. But if we withdraw that alone, and there's other things we can take away, they have a hard time, because once people see they are the bad guys, then people don't want to participate with them. It's just we've been indoctrinated, so we think the state is the good guy or the police are the good guys, and they're basically violating their entire oaths. But they don't care. They get their 6-figure salaries, they get their nice pensions, and they got to protect their family, as we mentioned earlier. So it's like, who's going to benefit? My family, or what's going on here? So it's very powerful divide and conquer, and most people don't understand that their rights come from themselves.
Right, and there's so many examples of that right now, but certainly a lot of attention is on what's going on in Virginia at the moment. And at the time we're recording this, we're 3 days away from a huge gathering in Virginia that some people say is going to be co-opted by false flag forces to demonize the idea of freedom. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Yep. Yeah, they're starting to talk about taking away the guns. I even saw, I think it's part of the same bill, maybe a different one, where they're trying to outlaw teaching martial arts like
that's already proposed. Right.
Golf. I said, oh my gosh. So this is why, we got to put some fire under our butts and really start promoting freedom and discuss these ideas of self-ownership and withdrawing cooperation. Yeah, you're right. This thing in Virginia is quite, I think a lot of people are paying attention to it, because what what organization would want to take away your right to defend yourself? Only a corrupt entity, tyrants, immoral thugs, and gangsters want to take away your guns. It's just like, why would you, if you had a cat, why would you want to declaw your cat and put him in the wild so he's going to get destroyed? his claws and his teeth, that's how he defends himself.
Right.
So we don't want guns to initiate violence. We want guns to protect ourselves. And the founders of the United States knew that. And so we have to talk about tyrants and tyranny. And, it's going to get uncomfortable, but we have to remember that freedom is the American dream, and we got to fight for it again.
Yeah, they wanted to have one country in the world that would be an example to the others, and nationalism in the sense that the media and the government wants to demonize it because it's something good. Because if you've got each country voluntarily cooperating with other ones, and then everybody that wants to support freedom becomes part of an independent cooperative instead of a global, controlled system. And you still have a country that you can protect borders against countries where everybody's not going to be really nice and they, may want to do something to you. But within the country, you're trying to protect individual rights and encourage every other country to do that for their own people. And the government would be the employee of the people, right? And just do what's beneficial. That was kind of the vision. And even though it hasn't been lived up to yet, I still think it's really valuable. It's not totally gone. And in Virginia, they're not, you talked about forced medical treatments. That's part of the thing that's going on in Virginia. The governor has been exposed as doing really horrible things. He's proposing not only that killing unborn babies is fine, but as long as that's fine, why worry about whether they're born or not? And, like the governor in New York, he says, afterwards is fine too. They're not really human until the mother decides it's convenient to have the kid. And that's actually on videotape, public show. That's the governor. And it's proposed now that they allow little kids in school to secretly give consent to medical treatments and not have to tell the parents. In fact, there's a site, one of the wiki sites, it's called WikiHow, I think, and it's now telling little kids how to have these kind of treatments without letting your parents know what you're doing, and it's helping them develop that, when they're 8 or 10 years old. It's an interesting situation, and I think the idea that you brought up of communication is really important, and the rulers agree because they're really clamping down on censorship right now. So there's kind of a race between that and alternative platforms that come up that are built on free speech, and hopefully that'll accelerate.
Yeah, there's more platforms arising, but like YouTube's a big one and Facebook. There's something called Flote, FLOTE. There's a pro-freedom founder there, which is a good one. I'm there at DJ Rodriguez. I'm there if you want to find me also, because if YouTube gets shut down or your channel gets deleted, or Facebook, we got to find each other, because the fight for freedom will continue. And this is why they have the FCC, right? They want to have a monopoly on what you can put on TV and radio. It's all about controlling the messaging. Goes back to the 20s. Edward Bernays talking about propaganda. They knew what they were doing and associating and selling cigarettes to women and as empowerment, and the whole program of messaging. So this is why we have to brand freedom and let people know freedom is sexy. Freedom is good, but we got to be able to find each other, and that's one platform, and keep speaking truth. I mean, what's going on in Virginia is so crazy, because you look at the Bill of Rights and it says, the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. It's like, now they're not trying to infringe it, they're trying to take away, these things. And it's just obvious for the people that are enlightened that this is absolutely immoral, it's illegal, unconstitutional, and they've breached their authority or breached their oath. So we have to adjust and adapt. Otherwise, they're just going to stomp on us, and then we're going to be kind of without anything left to do except just be slaves in perpetuity. And I don't think anybody wants that.
No, and I think they just say, well, the Constitution's fine. We totally believe in it. It's just there's an emergency, and we'll give you your rights back as soon as the emergency's over. In fact, the governor of Virginia, at this time we're recording, just declared another one yesterday, that it's a disarmament zone all around the Capitol, which means, those are the places where all the bad things happen. So it's kind of a awareness contest. Will the people stay hypnotized or will they wake up? And that's kind of what education is supposed to be for, right?
Yep, absolutely. The word education comes from the Latin educo, means to pull from within or to draw out. So you don't have to download something into children or download into us. We're already intelligent. We're already learning beings. We learn to walk, we learn to talk, we learn to understand facial expressions and basic mannerisms and these kind of things because
without a
we
license,
want to experience. Yeah, without a license, without the proper curriculum, which is another new paradigm. The word curriculum comes from the word path or course. It's not something that you memorize and regurgitate. It's your own path in life. And if you're interested in this subject, you can go that way. And then when you change paths, you change this way. And there's people who have written books hundreds and thousands of years ago that have great minds and talking about how to think critically or how to deal with difficulty, how to have discipline, how to be courageous. These things have been discussed. And once you start to realize that there's been a lot of great minds who've come before us, but why are we reading Jurassic Park in school? Why are we reading Diary of a Wimpy Kid or something? These entertainment books rather than books that actually feed your mind and your soul and that desire to live a good life. That's how I define education, is what you do to yourself to create a good life. It's not something you acquire. It's something that you do. And schools aren't going to teach you how to do that because they don't want you to be outspoken. They don't want you to be out there talking about freedom or empowerment or pro-health freedom, like avoiding the pharmaceutical drugs or some of the stuff you're talking about, like the Wi-Fi. They just want us to sit there and take it. But there are people rising up, homeschoolers and people that are even maybe have their kids in public school, parents, courageous parents. This issue, the forced vaccine issue, is got to be one of the canaries in the coal mine, one of the huge red flags for people to get activated and realize your government is out of control. They are violating all their oaths, and it's really up to us. It's not up to the politicians, and you can go and plead with them a little bit, but they've been bought off. They're concerned about their next election cycle. They're campaign donors and mostly, big pharma and big business. Yeah. And it really is time to be focused and build personal relationships with people so that you have a network of support around you when it does get dark and dangerous, as it looks like it will, and hopefully it doesn't, but it looks like it's going to get pretty bad before it gets good.
Yeah. I was recently talking to a person highly involved in a really positive private educational system with schools all over the place, and giving kids good experiences, teaching them how to do things themselves and to have independence and to respect their own abilities and everything. But one thing I saw that seemed to be missing is and I asked the question, what about teaching these kids about the bad things going on in the world? My thought was, if you don't know about that and you're not prepared, you're going to sign up for a career in GMOs or something like that and help destroy life on the planet by corrupting the gene database or so many other things, nuclear power or whatever, and drug medicine to get everybody addicted to medical drugs, which is a major program right now. How do to know why not to do those things for your life work? If you care about life on Earth, you have to in some way be aware of how they're being misused. And the person who was talking to me, who completely good motives and great person, was saying, well, it's been shown that if you do tell the kids about all that stuff and you really tell them, because it's like a horror movie in a way, except for real, then it's going to damage the kids even on a physical brain level. And my thought was, well, maybe indoctrinating the kids with fear would do that. But if you leave the fear component out, and just give them the awareness of what's going on, I don't think that would damage them at all. I think it would be the opposite. So if that's true, and I want to hear what you think about it, then it becomes really essential to know, how do you teach the kids the reality of the horror that's going on in the world, but how not to take that and use it as a reason to be terrified. Just the opposite.
Yeah, well, fear is something. Fear shuts us down. And so even yourself, myself, the listeners here, we do not want to be in fear. Okay. Nobody gets out of this game alive. Okay. So face the reality of our mortality. Okay. There's nothing to lose. That's what Steve Jobs said. You're already naked. Why are you afraid? You're already bearing the reality. So fear is what we would use to motivate ourselves if like a tiger was coming. But if the children know that they are the one, which I tell every child I work with, with the parents, there and everything, or I ask them, have you found your dream yet? Or are you still looking for your dream? The job of the parent, one of them, in my opinion, is to paint a bigger picture, paint a vision, learn about the young people who have changed the world, the people who started doing stuff at a young age, and tell your kids the truth. It doesn't mean you have to tell them about, all the bad stuff, but let them know there are predator human beings, and this has been documented throughout history. There's people that want to kill other people and harm people. And so you're the good person. You're a good person. You can be a healer. You can be a leader, a protector of humans. You can find the solutions. And I believe in you, son. I believe in you, daughter. And you want to put that into them, because it is that young mind with that imagination and with that insight. And they also haven't been so demoralized in work or life that they still believe in miracles. They still believe it's possible to do that. Rather than tell them all the bad stuff, you want to find out what is something that they're interested in. Maybe it is the whales, or maybe it is technology, and they want to be a good guy. I think the concept of morality can be, do you want to be a good person in the world, or do you want to be a bad person in the world? And generally, people want to be good. People are pretty good. When they learn these corrupt ideas, or they get harmed by the school system, or they get raped by a family member, or they get demoralized by some government official, where they start to have a vengeance and say, I'm going to get that guy. I'm going to have revenge, because they turn that anger into actual violence. And somebody that's loved, somebody that's accepted, they don't want to cause violence on people. They want to share the love. They want to distribute that. So what I tell is, be as truthful as you can to the kids. But again, mom and dad, you guys got to reprogram yourself on what's going on, and also transforming your mind, because it's a religion. The status religion is something that disempowers the individual, because you got to get permission to travel. You got to get permission to become a doctor, you permission to sell insurance, or like you got to get permission now to cut hair, to do tattoos. It's like, no, those things are all like, you got to get permission to fish. It's like, I have a right to my life, and as long as I don't harm somebody or harm their property, I can do whatever I want. And the young person, they're just a little bit ignorant, a little bit naive, so they're not aware of all these things. But I would be as truthful as you can. But in order to give them hope, the parent, you have to have hope too. So whatever that is, in community, in solutions, I recommend you look for ways to find hope and optimism, because it is there. It is this kind of light and dark world, but there are ways to get inspired and find hope. And it normally is with other people or events or technologies, things like that. But there is hope. It's just we don't want to download fear into our children.
No, and the only way not to download fear is not have it. So the parents are going to have to educate themselves in that sense too, right? Because you teach what you are, regardless of what you say.
Yeah. Well, I'm doing a workshop next weekend called The Teaching Parent. And one of the concepts I'm talking about is, because parents think, what do I teach my child? Well, you can have all these different downloadable curriculums, but most importantly is, what are you modeling to them? How are you showing them to demonstrate love, to demonstrate patience, compassion? How do you deal with anger? That is more powerful, because the children can hear the words, but they actually watch how you behave. And that's the most important teaching that they can get. It's like, how does mom deal with this? How does dad deal with this? And then from that, they assimilate. And if you're in fear, then your child's going to be in fear in general. And if you're hopeful or empowered, then your child will be that same way. And it's really amazing how like kind of they mirror us. They repeat what we say. It's like, you sound like me. Well, they're like a mini you. Of course, they have their own personalities and temperaments and genetics. But in terms of their initial, 5-7 years, they're basically like following along and doing what you do.
So you could teach, for example, how the basic industries in the U.S. and other places now are being used for harm, which is true, and it needs to be known. But you could either do it with the feeling of, all right, these are the things that we're going to solve, or these are the reasons that everything is terrible, and you're teaching the same facts, but your attitude, what you draw from the facts, is 180 degrees opposite. So for the parents and the teachers, it's which of those two attitudes are you teaching when you teach about what's going on in the world?
Right, exactly. You can look at the same problem, and either you get consumed in the problem and you feel defeated, or you look at the problem and you say, okay, how can I become part of the solution?
Yeah.
And again, you find other people that are working on that problem, and then you can reach out to them, and then as your child either meets them, watches them, and say, wow, I want to be like, Steve or Diane or whoever the person is, like, I want to be like them. They help me, and they're a good person in the world. I want to follow in their footsteps and help people and be a doctor or, be a veterinarian or whatever it is, because that's inspired them versus like, oh, this, the world's a dark place. And it's like, well, the world is,
you have to know if you're going to become a doctor or a veterinarian, for example, you're going to be told to harm your patients, whether they're animals or humans. And if you don't do it, they're going to either take your license away or worse. So realistically, the kid preparing for that says, all right, I know because I learned. This is the veterinarians who are complaining now. They're saying they're being forced to kill the dogs with rabies shots that don't prevent rabies, and they kill the dogs, some of them. And all right, you can become a veterinarian, but you're going to have to memorize that the rabies shots are wonderful, and the whole world would be rabid dogs if they didn't have the vaccines for it. And you're going to have a strategy so that you don't get blindsided when you graduate and feel like you have no choice, right? If you have some preparation for that, so I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn this whole industry around, and here's how I'm going to avoid the stranglehold of losing my license if I tell the truth. I think there are creative solutions. They just need to be discovered about how to do that and stay alive and everything. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it is. There's definitely solutions. I mean, this is one of the key things that the state does in their mass media propaganda is they want you to feel you can't do anything. And this is why Sun Tzu said the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting.
Right.
So they basically put all this, this great media stuff out there and say, oh, I can't do anything. When in reality, we far outnumber these people. And this is why I think the intentional community, whether it's 8 people or 10 or 50, 100, get together and start building a community in physical reality so that you can practice your veterinarianism without the license. And again, it's like, why do I need a license to help animals? Why do I need a license to, help human beings or to grow vegetables? Because they made it up and they want control and power. I mean, that's as simple as it gets. And children can get it.
Even human doctors aren't really allowed to be complete doctors anymore. They're facilitators, just like teachers, because if they go against in medicine what they call the standard of care, then they go to jail or lose a license or die or whatever's appropriate in their case. And a real doctor like they used to have before the drug companies controlled the whole business is they had to figure out with their creative intelligence what, from my observations over the years, helps people without any negative effect, because real medicine has no so-called side effects. In fact, what they call side effects, that's a fake, misleading term. They're just effects, but because they're called side effects, it means they're unimportant. And real medicine doesn't have any of that stuff. So I read a book from Dr. Porter, who was curing people, tens of thousands of people, with putting them on a fast and just giving them raw milk for 6 weeks or something. And they all got better. And now, if a doctor tried to do that, they'd probably go to jail or disappear, commit suicide. So the strategies that the young people need to come up with is, all right, the real medicine is still there, not just homeopathy, but lifestyle. Small details of lifestyle are at the root of almost every health condition. And you're not allowed to teach that, because if you are a registered nutritionist, if you say anything outside what they tell you, you lose your license to be a nutritionist. So it's like there's a common theme here, and the kids are going to have to think of creative solutions, which do exist. So we have to tell them what the issue is.
Yes.
Like, if you want to set up the chess puzzle in the newspaper like they used to have, here's where the pieces are. You have 3 moves to win the game. What are the 3 moves? And kids like games, and this one's real. Right? I think it can be solved.
It can be solved, and the reason is that these courts, right? This is how they get us too, like with the Social Security and the birth certificate and registering, us as chattel. I mean, this has been a well-designed plan for us to voluntarily give our rights away. Even the IRS. There was a gentleman, I can't remember his last name, Paymon. He started the Freedom Law School, which I just learned about, and he was demonstrating how people are so afraid of the IRS. But he said, when you sign the document, the 1040 document, that's opting into their system. And so understanding that when you sign documents without disclosure and understanding you're participating unwittingly, and this is how you get into the game. So there are solutions. Another little hack I learned about, a lot of people start a 501c3 nonprofit organization, but there's something called a 501a. And this is a different entity that you don't have to register, as I understand it, and you're not under the same restrictions as a 501c3. So there's wisdom in law and understanding what's the precedent, because they have to fool us. That's what the whole situation is. They have to trick us and deceive us. But as we become awake, and they know it's about personal sovereignty. They know the individual is sovereign, and the state, the government was supposed to protect the rights of the sovereign, of the individual, but we've given it away. And it's unbelievable the school system has gone on this long. I'm thankful for John Gatto and Charlotte Iserbyt and people who've gone before, but the fact that children are mandated to be there under threat of truancy, which in California the parents can be fined up to $2,000 or put in jail for a year. That's on the education code. But again, distinguishing between codes, statutes, and actual law, this is, I think, one of the battles that we got to learn as well.
Well, it's also that they go to jail if they're lucky, but what can happen too is they'll kidnap the children and just take them away from the parents. From parental neglect is what it's called. If you don't do to the kid what you're supposed to. It's interesting situation.
I think that's the other part of the forced vaccine issue, which is very alarming and also unacceptable. The Soviet Union would use mental illness as a way to abduct people. And I think what they're doing now is to abduct children, to then indoctrinate them and then lie to children and say, oh, your parents didn't love you or they were neglectful. And kids don't know when they're 5 or 8. Whatever you tell them by the time they're 12, 15 is, oh, I hate my parents or I hate them. And it's been, identified that children are receptible to these types of stories. So again,
even a story that they should be the other sex too is getting more and more popular. I mean, that's really interesting.
This is starting to come up. Oh man, I think in my conclusion so far, and I'm still learning and doing research on it, it seems that's part of the agenda to break up the family and to attack the strong men, the strong males. So nobody knows what roles you have. And it's not that men do this and women do this. It's like men are kind of naturally protectors and women are naturally nurturers. And it's totally fine if you switch that balance.
It's not bad that they're not identical. That was not a mistake of nature.
Absolutely. This is the yin and the yang, the positive and the negative. What's good is that we're different. The women can deliver babies. We can't do that, but we're physically stronger in many cases, So they want to break up the family because the family is the final barrier to their global state. And they want the state to become the parents,
Right.
and to be there for when there's poverty or lack of food or whatever it is, rather than your community, rather than your relationships with people who support you. They want people to have no family, no connection. So it's like, oh, what do? You go on welfare, or you go, depend on the government. And then once you depend on the government for your food or shelter, they got you by, the balls, man. You can't get away because now you need them. But the reality is they need us, and they steal our money through taxation, which is just robbery or extortion. And so this is the awakening that's happening. It's like, wow, those guys are the criminals, not us. We just want to be free. And again, this is why they don't teach individual independence, how to have an independent livelihood. They want you to be employee of an organization, wherein if we want freedom, we want to have freedom in our income as well, freedom in our health, freedom in our communication, absolute freedom in all ways. And then we can actually be a whole human being, so we're not dependent and weakened. And again, this takes deprogramming of our minds. I'm in the same deprogramming process. You got to be patient with yourself, but find positive people, find people that are trying to transform and grow so that you can help each other and not take and be what the state is, like a leech and like a parasite. But it takes some years, but I think ultimate freedom involves all those aspects.
Right. And just growing in awareness all the time. A lot of things are not what they seem. Probably nothing is what it seems, actually. And it's like growing up in a house of mirrors and learning to see outside and past the mirrors and what the world actually looks like. And one of the examples of that comes to mind from what you're saying is the idea that fighting the people in control is the way to get freedom. And that's actually a program put out by the people in power. Because if we try to use force against them, that will justify their total tyranny by any means that they need. Whereas what really is the vulnerable point is people within the system of power who are in ruling positions, the higher the better, can be waked up too. And then from inside, they can change the whole thing. So every one of those people that seems to be the worst possible, even the people at the top, above government, which have nothing to do with money, at the level where it's just pure satanic. It's for evil itself, and that's the whole point. Those people under their mountains of programming are exactly like everybody else. This idea that they're bad and we have to just destroy them and everything. That's like in Star Wars, where the Emperor wanted Luke to kill his father because he was bad. And Luke said, no, I'm not going to do that because I know that there's something else underneath. I think that's a really guarded secret, because that's true of all of these people who think they're really smart tyrants, and they're missing the main point of everything. They're setting up an unpleasant future for themselves, and they could be reached. And I think we have the power to do that if it's waked up. Yeah,
I think, like Gene Sharp talks about, he said if the tyranny is like a table, there's support that holds it up. So you got to, remove the support and then it comes down. However, some of these people, let's say the police or the medical, establishment, if they knew there was a place for them in the new society, like you don't have to work for the tyrants, come be a protector and be a health professional for the free society, for the voluntary people. Right. And they just got to find a way out. But if we're coming with the violence, then naturally they're going to fight against us. Right. And this even goes like to police. I've seen so many police videos lately. I'm like, man, I like a Threat Management Center out of Detroit. They're a voluntary type protector organization. But it's like we have to help realize that people, they want to have a good life, but they don't know that they're pawns in the system. They think that they're on the good side, but it's like, your kids are going to be harmed too. Your grandkids are not part of the super elite, the Bilderbergers and the Trilateral Commission. Unless you're a Rockefeller, a Rothschild, a Warburg, a DuPont, like you're not part of the club. So, come join us. And as you mentioned, like love is probably the greatest weapon. And it's difficult to say. It's like, we're not talking about, hippie stuff. We're saying like there's a soul inside that person and they just want love. And they could feel like, hey, strangers love me, or I'm accepted for who I am. why would I want to kill that person? They basically have to demoralize or dehumanize other individuals, say, oh, that's a domestic terrorist, or that's an anti-vaxxer, or whatever, that's a conspiracy theorist. Whereas, no, I'm a human being, you're a human being. Whether you believe in God or no God or whatever you believe, you have a right to your body. I got a right to my body. I got a right to my labor, and I don't owe you anything and you don't owe me anything. You know, let's think about consensual relationships in all ways. But if they only think they're going to make their money by representing this organization, the state, then they're locked in. But it's like, hey, there are other ways. There's peaceful, respectful, moral ways to protect people, and we want to recruit them or co-opt them or bring them along, even if it's just in their mind. You know, like, we're not trying to harm people. You know, that's what's so crazy about the movement is, like, we don't want to be doing anything bad. We just want to be left alone. But it's the state that's like this parasite that comes to take our money, take our children. And what's so alarming about CPS, I mean, when you go down the rabbit hole of CPS, they, you know, have like connected the foster industry and adoption, and these, you know, parents out there are connected. They're like ordering children, you know, and if it was like a meal or something, it's like, you can't just steal people's children, you know. So I think parents are starting to see the corruption, but many of them are still stuck in the left-right paradigm, the statist paradigm. But if they remember that your rights come from your own humanity, and you surround yourself with other people like that, it's very empowering, it's very uplifting, because you know they're not going to initiate violence, they're not going to use coercion, they're not going to call the police on you. It's like, let's work it out. You know, if there is a conflict, we can work it out. You don't have to call Jackboot Jimmy over here and, you know, break down the door. And you know, it's just like so many videos where grandmas are getting thrown on the ground, or you know, people with, you know, colostomy bags. Like, when are people going to give up? Well, they got to get the new idea. They have to have a new concept of what is freedom and what is a solution to this. But just trying to vote a good police chief in and get the bad guys out, it's just putting a Band-Aid on the real issue. It really got to be a paradigm shift.
Somebody's got to demonstrate the solution, I think. And if you look at education as it is now, and what you would consider the state of the art, even theoretical education that you're advocating, and when you talk to people, how close is it to showing people practical ways that they could make a good living without the negative aspect of participating in the destructive system?
Well, what I recommend everybody do is, start creating media. Well, like you are, you're a media professional. We're not going to get featured generally on the television or in the newspaper or the magazine. We got to create our own stuff. We got to create our own audiences, create our own platforms, or build our relationships on these platforms, because we are trying to go against this beast, and they're not going to promote it. They want to promote this politician or that politician, you know, or this Band-Aid or that, you know, minor, you know, fix. But to actually create transformational solutions, we got to get in the media world. And whether that's writing or doing audio or doing video, we have to produce content, because these platforms, which we're on, you know, YouTube and these various ones, they're just open. So they're waiting for people to create stuff from there. And then once you have an audience, then you can have, you know, maybe affiliate programs. You can do consulting. You can have your own different products, you know, clothing or whatever it is. But people have essential needs, right? They have shelter needs. They have food needs. They have security needs, entertainment needs. So you got to find out, what do people want, and then wrap that with freedom, or wrap that with peace and love and morality, or whatever it is. And then have it be something that you're interested in, something that you're passionate about. This is what Alan Watts said. He said, find something that you want to do and do that. Forget the money, because in 5 years, in 10 years, you'll be an expert in that field. And then people will come to you for that knowledge. So do what you want. If you got to work at the side, you know, you got to temporarily, you know, work for some giant corporation or whatever you're doing, have some type of dream, some direction of having an independent livelihood. And then that way you can make steps towards that, reading books, going to seminars, and learning. There is no overnight success. Success is like takes 10 years, 20, 30, 50 years. You know that. You
don't have to quit everything overnight. And I think another thing I'd like to add to that, and see what you think, is that you mentioned these people at, maybe not at the top, but higher up in the system, and in these generational families that have been in control at a pretty high level above elected leaders and dictators and things like that, telling them what they need to do. Even those people, this paradigm that there has to be conflict and they have to be the enemies or we have to be their enemies or something like that. That may be how it is now in what's happening, but there's nothing that says that has to be how it stays. And those people at very high positions, they're not even being selfish in an intelligent way, because they're setting up things based on hurting other people that are going to come back to them as part of a law of how nature works. And they don't have to go to the end of that and suffer the, consequences of it from their own actions. They can change now. And it's like there's a reason that the story of the prodigal son, which has been in many different belief systems, that everybody's made horrible mistakes, maybe not in memory, but before that. And they're just as great when they come back and say, I'm not going to do that anymore. So there has to be an open invitation to the worst rulers. No, we don't want to have them destroyed. We want them to wake up and enjoy what's left of their life by realizing they were in a bad dream, and they can change that as soon as they are tired of it. This is a good time.
Hey, you can change your life in a moment. That's one of the other great secrets. You don't have to go do all these courses or do all these great things. You can change right now. You just turn around. If you're facing east and you're tired of going east, you just turn around and go west, and your whole life can be different. Now, it's going to take a while to backtrack or to go hit a new destination, but your direction has changed. So when you change your direction, you do change the destiny.
Yeah. I think it's a vision of how the world could be. It's like Luke said, no, I'm not going to kill my father. You're wrong, Emperor. And he was right. His father ended up saving the galaxy in that movie. And the people that appear bad, you have to remember the difference between the actor and the character. They're really the worst people, even now at local levels doing really corrupt things. That's the character that the actor is playing. The actor is never the character. And if that consciousness of, wait a minute, why am I playing this role? All it's going to have is terrible results that I have to live with, no matter how, quote, successful, unquote, I might be. I don't think I'll play this role anymore. And we could inspire people to wake up, and they'd become our allies. And I don't think that's fantasy. Well, it's fantasy that could become real.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting conversation, to really explore that possibility of putting out content or messaging to say, hey, guys, I know you're part of this cabal and you were doing these sacrifices and hurting kids and hurting people. Like, come on, join us. Figure out some type of messaging or some type of like genuine conversation.
And I think what makes it genuine and powerful is not just saying what we would say, but when you talk to somebody, if they're intimidating or they're pretty negative in some way, or they're dangerous, or that they plan to, kill life on the planet, the usual stuff like that, don't talk to the character, because that perpetuates that person's imagining that that's who they are. Talk to the actor. For that, you need some perception. But if you talk to the actor and reach out to them in your intent while you're talking, amazing things can start happening. I don't think we're supposed to know about that. Yeah,
exactly. Talking about consciousness or beliefs or transformation, in a moment, they don't want that. Helping people get out of their trances or being able to really affect them at a deeper level. Again, I think this is why it's powerful to learn about love and genuine care and, self-love and self-care, once you learn to appreciate yourself, then you can appreciate other people. But I think these people would be doing this because they must be in some type of trance or some type of hypnosis, self-hate. I know, like you said, we make mistakes, and it's like, oh, we hate ourselves for these things, but it's like we have to forgive ourselves and let us know, hey, this is what it is to be a human being. We make mistakes, and we have to learn from these mistakes, but it doesn't make us who we are. Who we are is in this moment. We can determine who we are, and we can shape a new tomorrow if we have a conscious intention to do that. And I feel bad for some of these guys. These guys must have just pitiful lives. They don't probably have any love. They don't have any, connection or something. And maybe they do. I don't know, but I don't.
They're the biggest victims of the whole thing. Because in the play, that's the character they're acting as. And that's who wants to play the bad guy and for real, and set karma is not an imaginary belief. You said care about yourself so you can care about other people. That's not just a philosophy. There's a deep laws of nature that say you can't really love or care about or respect other people if you don't feel that way toward yourself. And so those guys, if their whole project is to destroy humanity, how do we think they feel toward themselves? What are they really living in subconscious level? It's not fun. They need to be saved more than anybody.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know, have you ever seen the movie called The Skulls?
No, what is it?
It's about the Skull and Bones fraternity in Yale, and I think this movie was made in 2000, but, this is the fraternity that George Bush Sr. and Jr. was a part of, John Kerry, right? These guys were running against each other in the presidential election. It's an elite secret society, right? Yeah. And so anyways, it just goes through, and it shows how, like, this young guy, he wants to be a part of this secret society, and then once he gets inside, they do this crazy rituals, and they basically get leverage on each other. They like tell the darkest secrets, and so then now they have something to bribe or blackmail you, and so it goes through the story of him trying to get out. So there was this elite circle that he got in, and then he's like, how do I get out of this? I don't want to be a part of this anymore. So I think that's what happens, and some of your people out there, I don't know if you've ever been in a fraternity. I was part of a fraternity at college, and it took a whole semester to like, what is this? It was a business fraternity, and I'm like, okay. And then like there are some weird stuff that happens in there, and all of a sudden it's like, now you're a brother in the fraternity. I'm like, what is this all about? Yeah. And it's like, it's so strange that it takes months to understand really what is going on inside, and then you cross over, and I've not participated for 10 years or something, but it's like, what is this? So I think that's what happens with many of the societies. They get in there, and then they're like, oh man, like this is some evil shit, man. Like, how do we deal with, like, how do we get out of here? Yeah. And you can't, it's like they say, a skull before any other is the phrase that they use in the movie. Yeah, it's like, we're above our rules.
You can get out, but it's not obvious how. And a lot of the top level people in Hollywood and entertainment and things like that are literally having to pledge permanent allegiance to Satan, and they think it's a joke sometimes, and their person who's saying it says, no, it's not a joke, and don't worry, you'll have lots of money and success afterwards. That happened to Bob Dylan and a bunch of other people that are well known, and they take it seriously, and they figure that's where they're going when their life is over. And then the closer it gets to the end, they say, well, maybe this wasn't a really great deal. But even for them, it's a false idea that you can't get out. You can get out whenever you decide.
Right.
And you're just not supposed to realize
That's right.
So.
Yeah, that's right. And those like threaten your business or threaten your family or something. But there is a way out. Yeah. And, but when people are on their deathbeds, they have all these regrets in life, but it's like, they wish they would have expressed love more. They wish they would have been courageous more, and I recommend if somebody's watching or hearing about this, go for it. Leave the secret society and promote freedom and love and peace and have some type of other goals to help humanity, not just your family.
They're not strong. They're just using your strength and corrupting it. But, so I would say anybody like that who thinks they've pledged to Satan and are lost, you're not lost. That's a complete hoax. Yeah. And it's like imagining that you're this weak, helpless being. You never were. It was always a facade. So don't worry about it. Just change. Well, listen, we're just running out of time. So what do you want people to remember out of this whole discussion that you think is most important and you want them to carry with them and act on?
I want mom and dads and uncles, grandparents out there to understand that we have to have a new paradigm of education. How you went to school, how I went to school in public school is not how the future is. So these smartphones, devices, the internet in general has changed the world. Imagine what's going to happen in 5 years and 10 years it's going to completely change the world. I think about half of the world is on the internet right now. Half of the world doesn't have an email address. They don't have an internet connection. So it's a new paradigm. And an education isn't something that you get. It's something that you do. It's something that you pursue. And you cannot give your child an education. This is something that they got to pursue on themselves. The analogy is that you can give somebody a gym membership, but if they don't go to the gym, they're not going to get fit. You can give someone books. You can give them the internet. You can give them all these things. But if they don't want to learn, they're not going to learn. So you want to relax on the coercion, relax on the force, and allow that natural desire to come out from within of what they want to learn. And then, as we mentioned, let them do it. Let them pursue that, because as they do that, they will focus their concentration, they will focus their energy, and then they'll become more proficient, they'll become a master, they'll become an expert, and then they can make a livelihood out of that. So it's a new paradigm. The world is evolving. We're shifting. And you guys are on the front edge of this whole movement because you're listening here to Richard and having a conversation. Is that the mainstream media is old. It's way behind us, but they have it on the stranglehold. So consider that there's new inventions being made, new discoveries occurring, and your child is growing up in a world completely different from the one you grew up in. So be open-minded, adapt and grow, and redefine education. It is a new paradigm that we all got to explore. And homeschooling is a way, apprenticeships are a way, but the traditional system is harming children. And I recommend you remove your children as soon as you can.
Sounds great. Inspiring. I hope we'll talk again soon, David. It's really been a pleasure. And hold on, and we'll say goodbye in the break here.
Absolutely. Okay. We'll see you all very soon.
Okay, you guys, there goes David Rodriguez, founder of Valor Academy in San Jose, and told us at the end there about this group on Facebook that sounds really good called Voluntary Village Creators. You should check that out. It sounded like it fills a really good need, and it fits right in with what Joel Skousen has been telling us as far as preparedness, and even if you have to be in the city for the moment, to be able to establish something outside of it would be really useful. And that's on Facebook, Voluntary Village Creators. And then he told me that also his website, which is mostly under construction, but it does have some things on it, and that's homeschoolleader.com, LEADER.com, homeschoolleader.com, telling people how to do homeschooling and a lot of things connected to that. I think the whole issue of education is extremely important and critical right now. And the only reason that the global rulers are really able to do what they're doing to humanity and really the whole biosphere and their program of extermination, which is really what's going on, is because of the lack of awareness and consciousness of us, the humans on the planet. And education is a deeper term than we've come to believe. Nowadays it's mostly memorizing what the teacher tells you in school, and the teacher is not, in most cases, a real teacher anymore. He or she is more of a facilitator that loses their job unless they say and use the materials exactly like they're told. Ultimately, in America, it's from the Department of Education, but I think in most countries it's coming down from the same kind of control source, and its purpose, at least here in the educational system, is pretty clearly to make sure that nobody gets educated. So since that's the case, you have to do it yourself. Just like you have to figure out how to take care of your physical body, how to keep your health intact, how to heal on mental and physical levels from whatever's going on, usually from past experiences and mistakes that we've made. It's in our hands, and we really need to do it. And yeah, it takes some work, effort. You have to learn about focus and actually doing some things, and discrimination between what's not true and what is true. And you can't just memorize that out of a book. You've got to develop the perception and ability to tell the difference by how things feel. And I know in conventional education, they tell you that feeling is all useless and it's misleading and it's unscientific and not reliable in any way at all. It's usually wrong, but that's because it's so valuable, and it's usually right once it's developed, and it has to be detached from addictions and preconceptions and things like that where we fool ourselves. But you can do that, and you need to do that if you want to really educate yourself, because educational systems just kind of give you the clues and the hints and the motivation and things like that, and then you have to educate yourself from there. And time is valuable, and it's passing fast, and we need to do it. So I really appreciate the work that David Rodriguez and other people like that are doing. Stay in touch with his work, and remember, as far as our shows are concerned on Lost Arts Radio, you can stay in touch with us on lostartsradio.com, and if we get banned or disappeared off a major platform that you're following us on, then stay in touch at lostartsradio.com, and also our channel on brighteon.com, which is brighteon.com, and our channel is brighteon.com/channel/Lost Arts Radio. You can subscribe now. That's a new feature that Brighteon's just unlocked, so it's just starting. I'd like to get a lot of subscribers, and that way you get notified when there's a new video coming out. It's a good service, and live stream is going to come before too long next on Brighteon as well. Also, you may have noticed we don't do any commercials at this point, so if you want to see us continue and stay on the air and be able to do some of our projects that are on hold because of lack of funds, support us on subscribestar.com/LostArtsRadio, and also at the donate buttons directly donating on lostartsradio.com and lostartsresearchinstitute.org. That would be greatly appreciated. Not if you're struggling for survival, of course, then you should focus on taking good care of yourself, because that's the best way to help everybody else. But if you've got the funds and the resources, consider helping us out. And if you want to start applying some of the stuff that we're talking about, the deeper concepts of health and consciousness tools that you can use to transform your own life, consider being a part of Planetary Healing Club, which you can access at planetaryhealingclub.com. The small dues that are involved in that go to support the nonprofit that's keeping all this stuff going, which is lostartsresearchinstitute.org. You can take a look at that and see our idea for the future there. If you have any questions or anything about whether it's worth being in the club, or you want to inquire about private consulting, which I do when I have time, that we can narrow down, just focus in on what you're dealing with right now, and best and fastest ways for you to transform your life into a whole different life quality every day. I do some private appointments like that, and you can email me. And there's also, will be shortly, a page up on lostartsradio.com where you can find out about private sessions. Let me see what else. Oh yeah, to get on our mailing list, in case we disappear or when we disappear off other major video platforms, you can either go to lostartsradio.com and sign up there, and that will let us keep in touch with you. If you can't find us or anything, we can send you material or videos or things like that. Or you can, since it only requires a name, excuse me, a name and an email address, you can email a request for that to info@lostartsradio.com. And remember our Saturday shows, which are at Saturday afternoons, 4:30 Pacific, 7:30 Eastern. And that's Lost Arts Radio Live, which we're getting ready for as we record this. And Planetary Healing Club meets 30 minutes later. And I'd like to see you there if you're ready to do some serious work on yourself on all levels. So that's about it. Thanks for being here to talk with David with us. And hope everything goes well for you in the coming week. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Take care of yourself. It's the best way to help everyone else.